Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. This week's episode, we revisit an issue. You remember all the discussion on the code of ethics and allegations made against the former SEBI chairman? What happened next is that you had a new SEBI chairman who set up a committee to look at the code of ethics, the high level committee, which submitted its report last week. Full marks to the High Level Committee's report on conflict of interest for delivering a thorough, dispassionate analysis of the inadequacies and lack of legal enforceability of the voluntary code of ethics applicable to the top brass of the Securities and Exchange Board of India since 2008. That's 16 years ago. Now, for all those whom this sounds like gobbledygook, let me put it in a nutshell. One, there were allegations against Madhvi Puri Buch that many of her actions and investments were in conflict with her role as the SEBI chairperson. Those of you who watch this blog regularly would know that I have done at least 3 video blogs on this, and the links are down here in the comments, which you may like to see, which really said that yes, SEBI had a very pathetic, legally dodgy code that it adopted voluntarily in 2008 without having it gazette notified. So all this we have put in the public domain, including comparisons with how SEBI's code functions as compared to the rest of the world. Because we try to say that we are the fifth largest capital market and exchange in the world, our code of ethics for the top brass of SEBI, chairperson and 3 whole-time members, should be on par with what is happening in the rest of the world. Instead, as I had pointed out in the past, SEBI had 2 codes. One for these 4 people who actually have an umbrella look over everything that is happening in SEBI, and a separate code which is much stricter for the rest of the staff who actually work in silos and don't have as much of exposure to everything, decisions, plans, policies as the top 4. Isn't this completely shocking? I know that many of you all have entered the capital markets since after COVID, which is 2020, but even you know that enough of regulations are being imposed by SEBI every week on every variety of stakeholder, investor, player, company, anyone who's listed and comes into SEBI's realm or responsibility. But think about it. Top 4 people at the top of this regulatory organization had an absolutely weak code. And I have said this repeatedly. Now, this high level committee has virtually endorsed and agreed with most of what I have been saying in previous blogs. But there is something more. Is it about one report by this high level committee which goes to the SEBI board and then they decide whether to adopt it fully or partly? Or should we ask for something much larger, which is an investigation? So, this report has done well to propose a set of sensible, enforceable reforms, uniform definitions, public disclosures, same rules for the rank and file of SEBI and the top brass, investment restrictions, robust recusal processes, independent ethics oversight mechanism, which is benchmarked to global standards, as I have been saying, and parity of rules within the organization. All that should have happened in 2008 is being proposed. Very good, excellent report. And SEBI now needs to adopt it in full. This will happen if the finance ministry buys in. But the finance ministry's role as administrative ministry doesn't end over here. There are a lot of things that this Pratyush Sinha-led committee has also pointed out which needs investigation. In fact, I would say this committee's report, when I say they've agreed with what we have said in the past, it's a damning indictment of how SEBI has been run for 16 years until allegations of conflict of interest against Madhvi Puri Buch exposed this flimsy, unenforceable, legally dubious code. Frankly, even I would not have got into it until this happened. That's when we examined the code, and I had the help of very senior and excellent lawyers who studied it and talked about how it would even have arguably violated Section 29 and 31 of the SEBI Act. Advocate Murli Neelkanthan pointed this out to me by doing a deep dive. The regulator never followed it up with a gazette notification, as he pointed out, which is what would have stamped and made this enforceable. And that is the rule. SEBI can't do what it likes, especially for its own top brass. It has to be approved by its administrative ministry, the finance ministry, and notified in the Gazette of India. Not only did the 2008 chairman C.B. Bhave did not do it, but successive chairman U.K. Sinha 2011 to 17, Ajay Tyagi 17 to 21, Madhavi Puri Buch 22 to 25 left the sham code untouched 16 years. And in this very period, SEBI was busy imposing ever stricter disclosure norms and penalties on every other market participant and stakeholder on a weekly basis. In fact, many intermediaries used to be worried about Friday night. New set of rules would come in place, very short window for implementation, but not to SEBI's top brass. That is left untouched. You don't think this merits an investigation? Or do you have just a high level committee which has done a great job? You implement it and move forward and forget the past? How could this go on? SEBI has been around since 92 and 16 years, it doesn't touch its own code of conduct. Now let's look at something else. Not only did SEBI not have rules that were strict for its top brass, but in the same period, it had turned so insular that it blocked all kinds of queries under the Right to Information Act. It did not even force stock exchanges, especially a monopoly like the National Stock Exchange, to come under the RTI Act. In fact, the NSE has lost a case at the first level in the Delhi High Court. It has filed an appeal, which has apparently gone into limbo and lost in the unresolved litigation in India, which goes on for decades. So, this is SEBI. Who is it protecting? And shouldn't this be investigated? Now, let's come to some more revelations from the high level committee. One that everyone seems to have missed is not only that the conflict code is applicable only to the senior leadership, but for the first time it says, and this is shocking, okay, that all SEBI employees are deemed as insiders under SEBI's insider trading regulations of 2015. Why are they deemed as insiders? Because they sit on information, on policy, on investigations. They know what they're going to do. They know what order they're going to issue. So they should not be trading ahead of what they do, which is very correct. But imagine this, the top four whole time members and chairman are not insiders. Same standard is not applicable to them. They're not categorized. How on earth can this happen? Committee also points out another privileged group, which is anybody who comes on a contractual and temporary basis. Now, who comes to SEBI on a contractual temporary basis for 3 years and 6 years? Very privileged connected people. Nobody else gets this opportunity. They are not insiders, and the rules that apply to the rank and file on restrictions of trading and the cooling off period or whatever does not apply even to them. No explanation. The committee has only said we have been informed. Committee is not expected to go into details. The finance ministry is supposed to ask who and why decided all these things. Now, another googly. They say that in 2018, the committee was told that these top four people voluntarily decided that they will follow the code. Again, what does this mean? Did they actually follow it, or did they just say that they will follow it? Was there any scrutiny? Were there disclosures? No. But from Jan 1st, 2018, they're voluntarily complying with restrictions based on which I guess SEBI was giving clean chits to its former chairman. Now, here again, context matters. Like I said before, this is the exact time when SEBI was rolling out new regulations. It also shows that 10 years after 2008, SEBI realized that, hello, there's something wrong over here. We, as the top brass, have much weaker regulations. Instead of examining the regulations like I did with the help of top lawyers, SEBI employs the best known lawyers at the highest possible rates. They could have set up a committee in 2018. Instead, it was internally decided, internal decision by whom? Was it documented? Who was party to it? What was the process of compliance that they were going to follow? Was it at all followed? Was it mentioned in the annual report? Don't ask any questions. I think it's time to ask the questions now. It's not too late. So what? Why wasn't it investigated in 2018? Why was it not placed before the SEBI board or the finance ministry? And did this internal decision even examine in full the weaknesses of the 2008 code? I'm assuming lots of people there knew how dubious it was. and they covered it up and they allowed it. If the regulator does this to themselves, the top brass, and holds everyone to impossible standards, especially on things like insider trading, where all kinds of presumptions also are made, then it needs an investigation. And I'm saying this to you because you are a market participant. It is your job to also raise questions on social media, in your WhatsApp groups, everywhere else where the government and people have to listen. And let's come back to why this part is significant. Now, the high level committee and what it has looked at. It has confirmed all the gaps and weaknesses. Like I said, this includes even the definition of family. So, SEBI's top brass has a very narrow definition of family, only children under 18 and dependents. Other employees, much broader restrictions. No independent ethics infrastructure at all. So, like I'm repeatedly saying, who monitors, who verifies, who are the reports made to, who scrutinizes them, who flags any problems in the application of the code? You don't have a mechanism. When you don't have a mechanism, nothing works. There was talk about how somebody can complain from outside, but there's no whistleblower process at all. Conveniently, I mean, who and how will you complain against regulators unless there's a process that's to be followed? The high level committee has pointed all this out. It also highlights and fixes the absence of penalties. So, I mean, there has to be consequences, right? For non compliance, there has to be disciplinary action. Again, prescribed for the rank and file, not for the top brass. So they have said members must disclose interests that could influence board decisions as viewed by an independent third party. But definitions are narrow, and the committee wants all this corrected. So, in short, it exposes that SEBI's governance framework lacks rigor, transparency, and parity. And it wants a technology driven, legally enforceable, unified new code with digital repositories, transparency, robust documented recusals, and ethics oversight infrastructure, which exists all over the world, and ongoing compliance monitoring along with whistleblower protection so that if you're affected, you can complain. And there's plenty to complain about. There's lots of talk about corruption at various levels. You will want to complain. So, implementing these recommendations requires some amendments, not only to the 2008 code, but probably to the employee service rules of 2001. Hopefully, the next SEBI board meeting will take this on board and do it. But like I said, it is not enough. It's not just about SEBI and its board. The ball is now in the finance ministry's court. After 16 years of inadequate oversight, it must recognize the urgency for strengthening SEBI's institutional integrity and its reputation, especially at a time when the secondary market is booming, retail investors are buying IPOs, coming into mutual funds in a big way. It is the ministry's job to not only ensure that the high level committee's report is adopted in full, no cherry picking, but it must commission an independent inquiry into this internal decision of 2008 that allowed senior leadership to voluntarily adopt stricter codes. And why did it not overhaul the code at that time? Remember, SEBI has been a member of the International Organization of Securities Commissions since 92. They had a conference at that time, celebrated it. I attended that conference. So you have been exposed to the global best practices since 92. Count the number of decades that is. And yet you come up with a weak, unenforceable conflict of interest framework. Cannot have happened by chance, neither in 2008 nor in 2018. We are now in 2025, short way from 2026. Unraveling this opacity is crucial to restoring SEBI's credibility, safeguarding public trust, and dispelling the perception of regulatory capture. It is also a way of ensuring that future leaders don't repeat this complacency and say, we frame the rules that we will follow. It cannot be like that. Investors and market intermediaries deserve nothing less from the government and the finance ministry. If you agree, please ask. Let me end by saying many of you have written in to say how you enjoy this blog because it has no nonsense and shouting and screaming and drama. If that's true, thank you so much for your kind comments, but please subscribe and share it. It's only when enough of people share and listen that we make change happen and this blog is sustainable. Thank you.